It's another episode of the Ranting Cast. It is season 4, the first episode of season 4. Frank Arcury here. I have Austin with me as my co-host. Ranting Ron is here as well, but he's taking care of everything behind the scenes as you can see him. We have a very special guest, Mike Commito. He is an author, he's a writer. He's got 2 books out right now, Hockey 365 and Hockey 365 the second period, and another book coming out next year in Leafs 365. Mike, how you doing tonight?
Doing well. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Now, you got the book, obviously, Hockey 365 and Hockey 365 the second period, and then Leafs one coming out next year. So, we brought you on because we want to talk a little bit about the Leafs. We want to get to know like what's going on with them and their expectations for this coming season. Matthews as well. Obviously, he's a couple years away from being a UFA. The Leafs can't even offer him an extension until next July. So the story of Matthews potentially walking from Toronto really becomes apparent by this time next year. But, Leaf fans are already talking about it now. So what's the sense that you're seeing?
Well, I mean, I think for the Leafs, it really does feel whether or not it is real yet a do or die season. I think expectations are really high. Obviously, things didn't go the club's way last year in the playoffs. I think obviously came pretty close against the Lightning, but it just didn't go their way. And so I think despite the fact that you could look at that playoff series and say that we'd seen some improvements, like they're still searching for that first round victory. It's coming on. I guess if they don't get it this year, it'll be another 19 years since they've won a first round series. So, I mean, short of that, I think if you look at some of the moves that the GM Kyle Dubas has done, these are kind of those types of moves, in my opinion, where if they work out, then that's your masterstroke. But if they don't work out this time, I think that there'll probably be some serious looks at whether or not this is the person that they're going to keep moving forward, right? Because again, I think like you look at a goaltender like Matt Murray. Obviously, he's had some issues staying healthy. He's obviously had some personal struggles with his father passing away, but I think Dubas and the team thinks that they can get a bit of a reclamation project. And he did have stretches with the Senators last year where he played really well, but it is still a pretty big gamble, right? So again, you just never know if that's going to work out. If it does work out, then I think we're having a different conversation. That being said, I think even if it does work out throughout the regular season with Murray coming in net, you still have to find the success in the playoffs, right? And I think, not winning that first round, regardless of how hard fought that series is, regardless of who they play, and if they come up short in overtime in Game 7, I think at this point, the pain that Mike Babcock talked about in 2015, like I think we're looking to get through that pain, and so, I think it is a do or die season in that sense.
Yeah, that's kind of the sense I get too, that if the Leafs don't get past the first round, I mean, you're looking at the possibility that Dubas and Sheldon Keefe might both get fired if that happens. And then if that does happen, are you kind of almost guaranteeing the fact that Austin Matthews would walk in 2024, and then another guy not getting talked about too is Willie Nylander. He's also a UFA in 2024. So you're looking at the possibility of losing both those guys, whether it's through them walking or through trade. And that's just trading them because they won't re-sign with your team, and you'd got to get some assets back for them. The Leafs and the moves that and I do agree, the moves the Leafs made in the summer kind of signify like this is almost their last chance. And they kept Kerfoot. Austin, to chime in when you can. They kept Kerfoot. They Engvall's back. They signed Kelly Yarncrook really to be a glorified, really good fourth line center for them, probably in that case, or maybe third line center in that case. Nicholas Obi-Kubel was brought in. Wayne Simmons is back. They signed Adam Gaudette. They still haven't signed Rasmus Sandin, which they don't have the cap space to do it right now. I'm on cap friendly. They're just under $1.5 million over the spending limit. So how are they going to get Sandin under contract now too? Because he's one of their better defensemen that they need to sign.
Yeah. No, I mean, there's probably gonna have to be some shuffling before they slide him in. I mean, there's I think there's still some high profile RFAs that haven't signed yet going into camp. I think of Jason Robertson in Dallas,
He's the
obviously
biggest
his
one, yeah.
birthplace in Toronto. That's a big one. But certainly, I think it's not necessarily that uncommon at this time to still be trying to make things work and move some things around. But to your point, that if they're going to get that deal done, whether it's a short-term deal or not, they're going to have to find some flexibility somewhere, right? So it's going to be interesting, obviously, in the next couple of weeks as we get closer to camp and closer to the regular season.
I would imagine that they would tie it in. They would tie in Sandin's contract with Timothy Liljegren. Do you think? Because the Liljegren's on a 2-year bridge right now too. So you would have to think that they would want to tie those two in together, considering that they both have basically come up through the system together.
Yeah, I mean, I think especially when you're looking at comparables, like look no further than within your own organization. But certainly, I think there's the bar's been set with some other young defensemen across the league. Again, I think Sandin might have a number in mind of what he's looking for, but I think that's a fair comparison to start looking at, especially as the clock continues to tick off.
All right. So before we move on, I'm gonna ask Austin a real quick question. If you are the Leafs right now, what's the move you make to get under the cap and sign Rasmus Sandin? Mike, this question can go for you too, but I want to hear what Austin says first.
Well, I mean, I'm not 100% sure what they could do, but I actually was going to ask a question regarding the defense for the Leafs. Like, what are your thoughts on like the move that Labushkin, like how did he play? Like what pairing did he play for the Leafs?
Oh man, it feels like it was such a long time ago watching the playoffs. I'd love to tell you what I can recall from his game, other than just remembering that he was the Russian bear. But yeah, but to be quite honest, I mean, I liked his game. Again, I thought he brought a good physical presence to the blue line that I think they've been missing. Not necessarily missing, but I think a lot of their other players that they've had over the years, I think, have now kind of fit the mold of the more, the puck moving, skating, like offensively minded and skating defenseman versus I think Labushkin is obviously kind of more, not necessarily from a bygone era, but again, more of that stay at home type defenseman who could lay the big hits and really kind of keep the puck out of your end. So again, I appreciated what he did. I think that's always something where that's always an area where the Leafs could always improve. I think certainly the moves they've made over the last few years in bringing in guys that they've had, with Brody and Giordano, but certainly I think it could always be improved. I don't think we've ever looked at a Leafs blue line in as long as I can remember and say we're good. Like I think that's all we need. I think there's always room for tinkering around the margins, and that's why I think it's so critical that they get the Sandin signing wrapped up pretty quickly, so that they can at least kind of solidify what that top six is going to look like this year, and really start getting those guys reps when it comes time to do that, right? Because again, how you do that, again, I think given this team and some of the moves that they've been able to pull off over the years, whether it's shedding salary or taking on or moving picks and to take on contracts to provide salary relief, I have no doubt that the team will find a way, I think, to engineer the space that they need to at least get Sandin under the cap for the start of the season. Whether that will trip bigger moves down the road, I don't see the team making a seismic move now to make that happen. I think if it means sitting him out until they can find a space that makes sense long term and for the outlook on the season, I think they'll do that. But I think over time, we might see some bigger moves. But I think right now there's some stuff they can do around the margins that I think would hopefully allow them the flexibility to pull this off.
I think the biggest question when it comes to their defense is Jake Muzzin's health.
Yeah.
If he's not healthy, then I would imagine they put him on LTIR, and that would free up the money to then sign Sandin, and then you hope that Muzzin gets healthy at some point. But with his play style, he might be a guy who gets put on LTIR and then never plays again. It's unfortunate, but that might be the reality of the case, considering he's got 2 years left on his contract and he's 33 years old. And with this question right now, would Toronto burn to the ground if Buffalo makes the playoffs and beats them before Toronto wins a playoff series. And I think Toronto burns to the ground if they just can't get out of the first round, no matter who beats them. Now, it doesn't have to be Buffalo. They could lose. They could lose to Tampa again this year, and they would burn to the ground. They could lose to Florida this year and would burn to the ground. I don't think it being the Sabres really would make it that much worse. I think just them losing in the first round in general is
that like the
bad enough.
Is that like the expectations like in Toronto, like every year pretty much like just go far? Because I mean, yeah, like what's like the expectation level every year for them? Like
I mean, I think it ratchets up every year. I think maybe a few years ago, like you're looking for that first round victory. I think as they continue to amass, the team that they've built, I think the expectation goes, winning a first round series, that's the bare minimum with a team that consists of all of these like high flying players, right? And so I think every year that you continue to get stuck at that first round barrier, that only I think ratchets up the anxiety and the pressure you going into the playoffs, right? Again, I think if the Leafs win a first round series this year with the core that they have, but then they lose in the second round, I still don't think that's enough, right? And again, we'll see what happens when they square off in the in the conference semifinals. But I would think that is the expectation, is that this team goes on a run, whether or not it's built, to go the distance to go all 4 rounds. I think it's pretty darn close. Obviously, it's really dependent on a lot of the health of some of the players we've already mentioned. It depends on whether or not they get the goaltending that they need. Again, I think looking at last year, though, if they just get average goaltending, like it's a bit of a different story in the regular season and into the playoffs. So, obviously a lot of stuff has to go right, but I think that they could pull it off. But I agree with you that it doesn't matter who does what in the playoffs. I think Leafs fans know now that at this point, if the team is not, making it out of that first round, like Leaf fans can beat themselves up better than any other fan base can. So whether it's Ottawa or Buffalo that somehow finds, playoff success before the Leafs do, I think is irrelevant. I think, Toronto fans, they're expecting and looking for that success in the playoffs, at a minimum, a first round series victory. I think obviously if Buffalo were to win a series before the Leafs or, beat the Leafs in the playoffs, I think it would certainly make for some good fodder on Twitter. But I think Leafs fans alone, have the gasoline in the matches to light it up if we don't see a different result this year in the playoffs.
Yeah, I think ultimately that's the mindset. It's realistically Stanley Cup or bust. So we're going to take a real quick break. Tonight's show, obviously, it's always brought to you by John Mary's and Dinosaur Barbecue. Check this out at Dinosaur Barbecue. Pick your own combo. Pick 2, $22. Pick 3, $27. Pick some foods like some pulled pork, St. Louis ribs, barbecue brisket. You get some jalapenos with that as well if you like jalapenos. Jalapeno cheddar, hot link sausage. You get some chicken, a quarter of a chicken. But if you want some more chicken, half a chicken. It's a little bit more, but it's really good chicken. Spicy shrimp as well. Pick 2 of those for $22. But if you want, more chicken, it'll be a little bit more. Pick 3 for $27. Dinosaur Barbecue has some great food combinations that you can have. And we will be right back on the Ranting Cast. Well, as you saw, Dinosaur Barbecue, tonight's sponsor of the show, also John and Mary's. Now, we're on the second half of the show. Austin's going to lead the way, but I'll start it really quick. Mike, thank you for coming on, first off. And as we mentioned at the top as well, you're an author. You've got a couple books out already, Hockey 365, the second period, and you've got a third book coming out next year, Leafs 365. So you and Austin talk about what you got going on, but just start off going over, your why you decided to be an author and write these books.
Yeah, so I mean, I think it always goes back to my love of hockey history. I started writing about hockey history, probably back in 2015, just as an escape when I was going through grad school, and then from there, it kind of snowballed from blogging for myself, blogging for other sites, getting paid in T-shirts, and then getting paid gigs with certain outlets. And then from there, I did a lot of work with the Kings and still do. But right around the time that I started, writing for the Kings in 2018, my first book came out. And it was just it made a lot of sense for me that over the, from 2015 to 2018, I had written a lot of different hockey history stories. And I thought that, given the portfolio I had built up, I had a nice little collection of stories that I think would make for a cool, word of the day type format. And again, I do a lot of this on Twitter with these daily moments in hockey history. So I think it was a natural extension of what I was doing and trying to make a name for myself in. And so I just figured, let's do kind of what I've been doing with the writing and kind of what I do on Twitter, put it into a book. And so the first book is 365 short hockey history stories, one for every day of the year. So it runs the gamut from, the NHL's early beginnings up until, we talked about Austin Matthews earlier, his 4-goal debut in 2016. And then, obviously with the first one, there's plenty of hockey history out there to go around. So I thought, let's do the second period, the same format, but 365 different hockey history stories that weren't included in the first book. I think the fact that we've now tied ourselves to a first period and a second period, there is going to be a third period. But again, they are a big undertaking. There's a lot of research and writing that goes into these. So not ready just yet to do the third period, but we will have to complete regulation. You can pick them up if you're interested, just to do a quick plug. Anywhere you like to buy books, they're available on Amazon or if you like to frequent your independent bookstore, wherever you are, you can grab them there. They're reasonably priced, in my opinion. They make for a great Christmas present, which is coming up not that far away. I don't want to be the guy that's already talking about Christmas when Halloween hasn't happened. But nevertheless, Hockey 365, keep it in your mind for stocking stuffers.
Yeah, so you said you started these books like through college.
Mm-hmm.
You thought of the idea through college.
Well, I would say that the books themselves, I didn't have the idea for the books until after. I think
okay.
When I was in school, the idea for hockey history kind of came about, and it was actually what I was on vacation on a beach in Mexico in 2016 or 2017, and I was reading a hockey history book, Val James's autobiography, Black Ice, which is a great book, and I just kind of thought to myself, life's too short. This is the type of stuff that I've only been reading hockey books at this time. I was under contract to write a different book that had nothing to do with hockey. By the time I got back from the vacation, I canceled the contract I had with the other publisher and then set about trying to find an agent and a publisher to get this idea brought to life. And that's kind of how it happened. Was on that beach, maybe a few too many cervezas, but I think it worked out in the long run. And that's honestly how it kind of came about, was just kind of thinking to myself, life's too short. If you want to write about hockey, you should write about hockey.
That's really cool. Where can you buy the books, and how much do they roughly cost?
I think you had mentioned Amazon as one of them, where you can buy them, but yeah, like any local bookstores.
Yeah, any independent bookstore. I mean, I think obviously if we're talking, to listeners in the States, Barnes and Nobles is like, I guess, our equivalent of Indigo or Chapters up here in Canada. Mm-hmm. I think for you guys, they probably retail for under $20. I just know the Canadian price in my mind is $20, and it's $23 for the new book, the second period, which came out last year. Mm-hmm. So again, you're looking at under $20 in the States.
Have you done any book tours or anything, or not yet?
Well, luckily the first book came out before the pandemic, so I did a launch here in Sudbury, where I live. Had a nice launch party, did a couple signings. Didn't necessarily go out on the road though. I think what I was doing every time I would go out of town for work or for vacation, I would always try to find a bookstore and go sign some books there, just to leave them there, so that if somebody wanted to buy the book, they could buy a signed copy of it. Obviously, you can't personalize it when you're doing it that way, but at least, got to get into the stores and check on what's going on. I think for when Leafs 365 comes out next year, I would love to probably try to do a tour of some kind, hitting some of those Leaf fan hotspots. Certainly, I think Toronto is on my list for that. Obviously, here in Sudbury, we have a lot of Toronto Maple Leafs fans, but we also have a lot of Habs fans and a lot of Bruins fans. So I don't necessarily have the market cornered here, but I think in Toronto, I think that's a pretty safe space for somebody looking to launch a book that's pretty much all about Leafs moments in history, the painful, but also the good ones as well.
Real quick to chime in. I'm actually surprised though. You mentioned living in Sudbury and everything, but it's not only you got Leafs fans. I'm surprised that you said there's Hab fans and Bruins fans too living there. That kind of surprises me.
Yeah, and I mean, I know quite a few Red Wings fans as well. I think honestly, it kind of comes down to the Habs fans make sense because we have a large French-speaking community here and in Northern Ontario, so you gravitate towards the Montreal fans. But honestly, I think it just harkens back to the original Six era, right? And for a long time, in these towns that kind of sprang up, in the early 1900s because of mining. As the town developed and you brought more people in to work in the industry, you really only had 6 teams to choose from, right? So you picked your allegiance, either it was Toronto or, depending on who you were and where somebody was from, you'd pick that team, right? I think of, my mom is from Sault Ste. Marie and she grew up a Leafs fan, despite the fact that Phil Esposito and Tony Esposito were from the Sioux. So my grandfather, was a Red Wings fan, but there was a lot of Bruins fans in the Sioux because they rooted for Phil Esposito, right? Obviously, he started his career with the Blackhawks, but I think he's synonymous with the Bruins and then later with the Rangers. So I think depending on where these guys come from, and in that early era, you had a lot of Northern Ontario players making the NHL, like Tim Horton, not far from here. George Armstrong is not far from Sudbury as well, in where he grew up. And so I think those allegiances run strong, right? And you would support the local guy wherever he played, right? So if he was a Red Wing, you supported the Red Wings. But if he ended up being a Bruin, hey, that you now had a faction of Bruins fans. And I think just because we're on the Bruins topic, I got to say this because, again, if you're not familiar with Sudbury, we have a bar in town called the Beef and Bird, and it was owned and operated by Jerry Topazzini, who's well known for playing on the Bruins. He was a PK specialist. And so after he retired, he founded this bar called the Beef and Bird, and it's basically a Bruin shrine. It still is. His kids run it now. He passed away in 2012. But the claim to fame for the Beef and Birds, they do this thing called Porchetta Bingo. And it was this fundraiser that Jerry Topazzini did for the local Coppercliff Minor Hockey Association. And every Saturday, you would go to the Beef and Bird, and you would play bingo. But rather than winning money, you would win a pound of porchetta that they would bring to your table, and you would eat it while you drank beer. So it's really one of those things that you have to experience in person. I'm probably not doing it justice now, but porchetta bingo, I think you'll find it in some other Italian, Canadian pockets across the country and maybe even the States, but it's certainly a unique Sudbury tradition as well.
So what you're saying is that we need to take a trip up to Sudbury and go hang out there.
I would say so. Just don't wear any sabers during that bar. My father-in-law used to wear Habs stuff in the bar when Jerry Topazzini was alive, and that was not a good plan. He was a Bruin till the day he died, and if you went into that bar, you either wore neutral colors or you wore Bruins colors because he did not appreciate the blue and white or the blue white.
It's funny too because obviously we're being in Buffalo here. It's not only just the Sabres. It's the Bills as well. I got the Josh Allen jersey right behind me. There's a bar that's like literally a couple blocks away from my house. It's called Casey's, and one of my favorite bars to go to. But they just got under new ownership during the pandemic, like a couple years ago, and the guy who owns it now is a Chiefs fan. So now he turned that into a Chiefs backers bar. Even though I still love the place, it's still one of my favorite bars to go to. Even as a Bills fan, I will go there for Bills games, but I got to see the Chiefs stuff, and I got to be reminded of that the Bills have lost to the Chiefs now 2 years in a row in the playoffs. So I kind of get that feeling, if I go there, I'm kind of feeling that same way. But if I love the place, I love the place. I don't care. I will still also go there, even if, you're a backer for another team, just because, well, I like going to good, good food and bar places. So it's still really cool to see and hear about.
It's a classic spot here in Sudbury. That's for sure.
Austin, anything else? Anything else we got?
Yeah. How many pages is the book? Like how big are the books roughly?
So each story is 1 page long. So you've got 366 because I account for the leap year. So there's always a February 29th story.
Mm-hmm.
So cool. Yeah, like each book probably clocks in at 400 pages because you have to add in, the introduction and some concluding remarks. Yeah. but they're pretty quick reads because obviously they're a page. I remember one time somebody said, like, I hate to say this to you, but like it's kind of a good, book for the bathroom. And I said, no, that's good. Like that's why we did it the way that we did. We want you to be able to pick it up and put it down. It's a good bathroom book. It's a good coffee table reader. It's a good book to kind of throw out, at your camp or your cottage, wherever you are, so that people can pick it up and read a couple pages and then read a couple more later. So I definitely don't shy away from the idea that it's a good bathroom gift for somebody that that likes to get a lot of reading done on the phone. So keep that in mind as well.
No, I appreciate that, just because it's a nice book to pass the time with, and and there's not in today's day and age, most people are sitting in the bathroom and they're scrolling through Twitter, they're scrolling through some kind of social media, or they're scrolling through TikTok. So to have this kind of alternative, especially if you don't have access to a phone or something, this would be, I think that if you're a hockey fan and you need something quick to read, or for like 10 minutes, let's say, you're just trying to pass the time, or like you're in intermission watching a game, this is the kind of book you'd want to read, and just you read it and you're just like, oh, that's interesting, that's a cool story, I'm glad I read that. I appreciate that part.
That's the goal. If I can get somebody to say that while they're on the can or on their couch.
So before we end the show, Mike, real quick prediction. How do you think the Leafs do this year? Do you think they finally get over the hump, or do you expect it to be another year of talking about how they can't get out of the first round, and maybe even talking about potentially Dubas and Keefe losing their job?
Well, if you were to go back over the last 4 years, you'd probably be able to find video of me saying in each of those clips that this is the year that the Leafs get over the hump. I have no reason to change my tune now. I have faith in the plan. Again, you never know what's going to happen once the season starts rolling, but I'll go on record now. We're talking September 12th, 2022. Check back with me in 8 months' time, but I feel as though that this is the year where they get past that first round. Whether or not they are able to put it all together, I'll wait to kind of to weigh in on that. But I think right now I'm willing to go out on a limb and say that this is the year where they at least break through and get that cathartic series win for the first time since 2004.
Yeah, it's hard to think about. I mean, 2004, it's 18 years ago at this point, about to be 19 soon. And
yeah,
I mean, being here in Buffalo, we haven't seen playoffs for the Sabres since 2011. And that's insane to think as well. And the Sabres haven't won, and the Sabres themselves haven't won a playoff series since 2007. So it's like we're both really in this playoff drought, but I mean, the Leafs make the playoffs at least. We have hopes for the Sabres this year, but we're just, it's still, we'll see. They're gonna have a lot of young guys coming up. It kind of reminds me of the 16-17 Leafs in a way, just because they're gonna have a bunch of young guys playing, but they don't obviously have the top guys like a rookie Matthews or a rookie Marner or a rookie Nylander. Sabres are going to have Jack Quinn playing for them, who's probably the closest to Nylander at least. Peterka's expected to make the roster as well, but the season, it's starting in a month away. We're a month out. The Sabres Prospect Challenge starts on Thursday. There's going to be Sabres hockey this week. Like that's happening. Then there's going to be other prospect teams playing, and then camp's opening up. So Leafs camp's going to be opening up soon, and then we got Sabres camp. We got camp for all the NHL teams. So Mike, thank you for coming on. You've been awesome. Follow Mike on Twitter at Mike Commito. Sorry, MikeCommito. All one word on Twitter. You find him. Hockey 365, Hockey 365, the second period. Leafs 365 coming out next year. Thank you for coming on, Mike. This has been the Ranting Cast. I'm Frank Arcury, Austin, Ranting Ron behind the scenes. We'll be back again to preview some more Sabres hockey and some other teams as well for this season. So thank you. Have a good night.
Thanks, guys.